Hey everyone, welcome to my humble office, practice room, and not so professionally designed Foos News studio. I'm Rich Marsh, and I spend most of my free time trapped in the mysterious world of Foosball. Let me give you a quick introduction. Most weekends, I'm on the road or in the air, travelling to a city in Europe or farther afield to compete in international tournaments. That's me. When I'm not playing, I referee more than my fair share of matches, and sometimes hide away in the commentary booth. Back home in Bucharest, I run the National Federation of Romania, which usually means I'm fighting bureaucracy and wishing online application forms existed. I also volunteer for commissions that aim to grow the sport worldwide. Why not eat into that already busy schedule and start vlogging about all things foosball related? Oh, and if you're wondering how I get away with devoting this much time to a hobby, that's because my better half Cathy shares the same passion, shown here metaphorically and literally carrying me to victory. And she's rather good at foosball. At least 1 in 3 tag photos on her Facebook page contain a podium or trophy of some kind. Whenever the topic of foosball comes up in conversation with regular human beings, I always try my best to summarise exactly what it is I spend my time doing. But it turns out that's pretty difficult. There's a lot going on. To actually cover all the details takes much more time than most recipients have patience for, and once I get going, it's hard to stop.
Much later.
So I've challenged myself to explain the world of foosball, broadly at least, in less than 20 minutes. Will I be successful? I guess you'll have to stick around and judge for yourself. Whether this video accidentally popped up via the magic of YouTube algorithms, or you're one of the foosers who already knows my face, hopefully you find this rapid-fire guide helpful and at least a little interesting. Start the clock. Most people's first exposure to foosball is usually in bar, games arcade, hipster office, or from watching reruns of Friends. You likely walked up with some mates, shamelessly spun the rods around, and had a decent time, with no idea, or frankly interest, in how deep the rabbit hole truly goes. But like most games, there are dedicated groups of players across the globe who over the decades have invented techniques, developed strategies, built rule sets, optimized tables, launched professional tours, and attempted to turn the game into a serious sport, as you can see from Kicks Hamburg, one of the finest venues in all of Germany. I'll save the history for a different video. Just be aware that the US tour was giving away Corvettes as prizes back in the 1970s. Oh boy, there's a lot of points I still need to cover. The foosball world is complex. People play in a lot of different countries, each with their own origins of the game. That means different styles, cultural rules, levels of professionalism, and willingness to join governing bodies. The International Table Soccer Federation, ITSF for short, exists with the lofty ambitions of unifying what they can and raising the profile of foosball to the eventual level of Olympic sport. They also have some cool side projects, like raising money to fund tables for schools. The aims are noble, with a lot of work happening behind the scenes, but much of it is done by volunteers, and there have definitely been some debatable decisions depending on your point of view. Most countries with a foosball scene end up forming a national federation, which is eligible to become a member of the ITSF. There's a lot of map coverage, with 63 member countries at time of recording. While many federations are still in their infancy, just trying to keep players happy and run a few tournaments here and there, others are Goliaths with official sports status in their nation. Okay, same map, different colours. What do these represent? Well, it's the main table types used in each country. You see, unlike table tennis or darts, there isn't one standard piece of equipment that we all play on. Instead, players either stick to a pocket of the world they're used to, or learn to play on the different tables available, particularly so in Europe. Most tables are similar, requiring a little adaptation, but there are sometimes big differences that can make amazing players on one table look truly amateurish on another. ITSF recognises 9 tables as being competition worthy, and it is worth noting there are more options to play on outside of that. Of the 9, the top 5 here are promoted as official tables. I apologise for the grainy images, let's move on quickly to some individual descriptions. Tornado, the dominant table in the US and Middle East, is a robust, consistent and, showing no bias whatsoever, beautiful creation, which has stood the test of time, really rewarding a mix of technique, consistency and mental game strength. Leopard, the pride of Germany, which has quickly taken over much of Europe, is also a well-built, consistent table. It's arguably a little too easy to pick up for beginners, but it's a great way of avoiding the horrendous learning curve for brand new players, and at the highest levels, it's crazy competitive. Bonzini, the pride of France, and weirdly Denmark due to French influence, is the clay court of foosball. It's strange, unnatural, and requires a certain elegance and deftness of touch. But if you've grown up on it, put the work in, you'll have a huge advantage over literally everyone else, while simultaneously looking very fluid and stylish, just because of the nature of the design. Many folks would still choose to see the wooden exterior burn to ashes rather than learning it though. The Italian Garlando table is a bit of an odd one out these days. It's still a major manufacturer in Europe for the casual market and maintains support from a few federations, but Leonhardt is taking market share, at least in the competitive scene. Like Bonzini, it's very hard for those unfamiliar with its quirks. If you hone your technique to account for the light rods, smooth surface, and often egg-shaped balls, you can be devastating. But even top players sometimes struggle to make things look controlled. Opinions from Garlando pros are neatly summarised by this gift. Up until this point, if you attended a tournament on any of those four tables, in 99.9% of cases you'd be playing according to the standard match play rules of the game, which I refer to as official rules for simplicity's sake. That means formal kickoffs, control passes, time limits on each rod, and typically a few variations of high percentage set shots. The background clip here is yours truly from the Bonzini World Series quarterfinals in 2023, highlighting my best offensive moment of the match, followed by a continued struggle to defend against an incredibly talented young French forward. It's all about reading your opponent's movements, baiting them into mistakes, executing solid options, and dictating and adapting game plans as a match progresses. We often joke about it being chess mixed with hand-eye coordination, and that's not far off. As for the fifth official table, well, that needs a bit more explanation. Its name is Roberto Sport, also an Italian brand. It looks similar to the Garlando, but this table is built for a completely different style of play. It seems that in Italy, these guys clearly grew up with more energy from their pasta-heavy diets and strong coffees, opting to play a style of rollerball, the antithesis of controlled play we've just seen. Depending on the subset of rules chosen, players either have one touch per rod, known as al volo style, shown in this clip, or something a bit more complex that's hard to explain, and need to throw the ball into the wall in a precise manner to restart play after a foul, of which there are lots. They also have a tendency to move tables around through excessive playing force. To be honest, it looks chaotic, even to us official rules folks. But there are tens of thousands of players in Italy who play this way, and they're unbeatable at their own game. Next up is the new Infinity table from Spain, which is a brand new model combining attributes of existing Spanish tables. The picture here is actually of a slightly older Techno table, but the concept is broadly similar. Let's zoom in. Okay, yeah, this one is also weird. The player figures, or puppets, have two-pronged legs that can trap and hold the ball against the surface. That surface itself is a ball that caves inwards towards the middle, and the formation of rods is completely different, which changes the game entirely. Best to check out some footage. Similar in some ways to the Italian style, Spanish players have developed a totally different set of shots, passes and skills that focus more on raw speed and shot strength. As an official rules player, I don't even know where to start explaining the procedures or game concepts at play here. And even with the background volume lowered, you can still hear the pings of the heavy puppets as the ball clatters around the playing surface. While parts of Spain are now opting for Leonhardt and official play, there remains a very large player base that favours this kind of two-legs action. And in 2024, there's going to be more crossover between two legs and official ITSF tournaments, so I guess we'll see what comes from that. Just to quickly finish off the table point, there are a few other tables which typically have smaller competitive seats, such as Rosengart in parts of Central Europe, Ulrich, which I'll come back to when we talk about tournaments and rankings, and 5-Star, which is the upcoming Chinese table that I honestly know almost nothing about. I'm already halfway through the allotted time, and I've yet to cover what actually happens at a foosball tournament, so let's do that. Firstly, it depends on your eligibility. Tournament organisers have a certain level of freedom to run different categories of events. They can be open, or limited to men, women, juniors, or seniors. Competitions can be singles or doubles. It's also fairly common to see mixed doubles, where teams consist of, shockingly, a man and a woman. Events will launch throughout the weekend, sometimes extended to include Thursday, Friday or Monday, with attendees playing from mid-morning until late evening, if things go to plan. Some tournaments will have additional events aimed at more casual players, or divisional events, limiting entry to those with a specific ranking, giving that group a shot at winning some medals and not just getting destroyed by better players. There is one extra event category called Classic Doubles. It makes one particularly divisive modern era shot, the snake, illegal, and are just a few other rules. There's too much history to delve into here, but just know it's there. It might crop up as a debate episode on this channel at some point. There are a couple of common formats for events, depending on where you are in the world. In Europe, the standard these days is to play 4 to 6 rounds of qualifying matches in a system known as Swiss, where you continually play opponents with similar results to yourself, shown here in a qualification ranking table. The field then moves on to a single knockout bracket, playing down to a final. Top-seeded players may skip the qualifications if there are lots of entrants. It's a fairly standard approach across sport, so not too much to explain. In qualifying, teams usually play best of 3 sets, with each set being a race to 5 goals. If an organiser needs to save time, it might instead be the first player to win a simple race to 7 goals. In the elimination rounds, as shown in this screenshot, the default game format is best of 5 sets, 5 goals. And if it's tied up at 2-2 in sets and 4-4 in goals, players enter overtime until someone wins by 2 goals or reaches a maximum ceiling of 8. The most extreme defense-heavy matches can stretch up to an hour. Teams also get 2 timeouts per set, which last up to 30 seconds each. These are used to break momentum, gather composure, or to avoid going over a time limit. They quickly become an important component of match strategy. In the US, and some other locations, the format mostly used is called double elimination. Teams start with a standard winners bracket of best of 5s, shown here in green, but drop into a losers bracket after their first loss, where it's possible to fight back all the way to the grand final. Matches on the losers side are normally best of 3 or something shorter to speed things up. This double elim format gives all players a chance to, let's be honest, screw up once, and still make a comeback, which can lead to exciting finals, at the expense of making it impossible to plan event timings. It's not uncommon to finish at 2 AM before resuming the next morning. Tournaments exist for all levels of play, from weekly pub nights where you get a random partner, through to world championships requiring players to qualify over the course of a season or two. Like everything in Foosball, it's not as simple as it could be. I'll start with the ITSF, which sanctions many tournaments each calendar season, giving different ranking points for events of different levels and sizes. Here's the calendar for what's coming up over the next few months of 2024. It's going to be busy. A player's best 7 tournament finishes per category count towards their final annual ranking. As an incentive to players, top 16 men and top 8 women each year qualify automatically for the Multi-Table World Championships, an event held every 2 years or so. These are my ITSF singles results from 2022, which was a particularly good year for me. They included a win in a decently stacked London tournament, plus a few quarter-final finishes, dragging my points total up after disappointing placements in 2 of the bigger events of the year. I squeaked into the top 16, finishing 13th overall. In countries with lots of players and strong organisations, such as Germany, there will be dozens of smaller events targeting players in specific regions, giving German players the chance to pick up national ranking points. They follow a more complex set of formulas I don't care to explain. The same kind of system exists in France, where the FFT has its own tour and leagues, rating French players to help determine national champions. Most nations do something similar to this, albeit on a smaller scale. P4P, or Players for Players, is a bit of a special case. Based in Germany, it runs events on the popular Auric table, and used to be something of a competitor to ITSF. Tournaments still happen, but P4P has struggled to keep up player numbers since the pandemic, and has partnered with ITSF on recent occasions to sanction dual ranking events. The calendar for 2024 is sadly a bit thin on the ground. I'm still a fan, The tables are great, venues are always within hotels, and it makes life easy for those of us travelling by air. There are also some amazingly talented P4P loyalists that don't really go to other events, but they can dominate on their home table. Rather than award static points based on finishing position like ITSF, P4P opts for the more complex but theoretically better ELO rating system, the version of which is used in chess. This system shifts players around based on the strength of their opponents, even factoring in winning streaks. In practice, however, with limited events and lower than expected turnouts, the system is a bit broken. Many excellent players fall into middle tier categories, even the amateur division, purely due to lack of attendance and losses to other under-ranked players in their brackets. The US, given its geographic distance from ITSF's hub in France, has a history of doing its own thing, though typically American. There is an IFP Tour, standing for International Foosball Promotions, with some ITSF sanctioned tournaments, but it also features a bucket load of other major tour stubs. There's also a handful of separate US foosball promoters that run events across different states. Prize funds in the US are bigger, but so are the entry fees. I'll be honest here, if you're looking to make a living from being a professional foosball player, it's a tough dream until we can get big sponsors back on board. As the vast majority of American players don't travel beyond their local tour stops, the US has yet another independent ranking system, one which is fiercely debated in Facebook groups and suffers from a bit of opaqueness, but it generally puts players in the right buckets. Unless you're European, that is. Then there will be complaints from the locals, whatever happens. Outside of singles and doubles competitions, there are also opportunities for teamwork, typically by representing a club. Most federations run leagues where teams of 4 to 6 players line up to race to 40 goals in combinations of singles and doubles, in a sort of relay-like system. Like football or soccer for my American audience, teams are founded in a locality, such as a city, but are normally open to international players, provided they're willing to travel to play in league matches. I myself play for a German team in the Bundesliga 3 weekends a year, which is the toughest league in existence, at least right now. In Europe, team leagues culminate in the European Champions League, with the top 1 or 2 teams from each country being invited to compete against each other, primarily for glory and bragging rights. Teams pick a home table, with matches played in a multi-table format, really highlighting some of the challenges I talked about earlier. Probably the biggest event in foosball is the Nations World Cup, held during the same week as the individual World Championships, roughly every 2 years. The same multi-table team format is extended to nations, with players eager to represent their country on the massive stage. There are national anthems, serious finals area staging, and an intensity that really can't be replicated. It's an honour to be a member of Team GB, and I look forward to competing every chance I get. Just look at the number of smiling British faces on display. That's a rare sight. Oh yeah, one final thing which doesn't really fit the flow, but I'm including it because this question comes up a lot. Yes, the official rules are complicated, and that means referees do in fact exist to help manage tense battles deep in tournaments. We do get paid for it, at least at the bigger events, and it is both rewarding and awful. I have lots more to say about that in the near future.
20 minutes later.
So, there you have it. An overview of the world of foosball, probably stealthily edited to come in just under the 20-minute mark. I do hope you found that interesting, or maybe just got the sense of what a die-hard fan of the sport really thinks. In any case, if you have any questions or inspirations for future videos, just let me know in the comments below. Maybe you'll inspire the follow-up. Thanks everyone.